Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstead and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Greetings, Hawks fans. Welcome into another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I am your host, Keith Myers, filling in for Bill, and filling in for me again this week is Dayna O'Gorman from Our Turf Football, one of my favorite football people ever. So thank you for coming and joining us, Dayna.
No, it's fun to be able to do this back-to-back weeks. We can go a little deeper into the game. I love it.
Yeah. So another win. Yes, the Seahawks escaped New England with another victory. They're 2-0. Are you jumping on the bandwagon yet? You ready to consider them Super Bowl team because they're 2-0?
No, I would hope nobody is doing that with their team except for maybe the Chiefs, who even they looked a little questionable this week for sure. This game was interesting. I think that first and foremost, we need to give a lot of kudos to New England. I know that in our Pick'em show, I had them in a head-to-head race with the Panthers on who's getting the first pick in the draft. And so for the way that they have come out and played has been extremely impressive. When they beat Cincinnati, I'm like, maybe this team's got a little bit more to it. But then watching them closer this week, very impressive. And so I do think that we can't be too hard on Seattle for having to go to overtime against the Patriots, because I do think the Patriots are a little better than maybe we thought they were going to be. And kudos to Gerard Mayo for that.
Mm-hmm.
And
very much a well-coached team.
Oh, yeah.
Only had 3 penalties in the entire game. They just didn't make mistakes. Like they didn't have, they don't have that superstar player anywhere, which if they did, they would have been scary. But man, they just did not make any mistakes in that game.
Yeah.
It makes it hard.
It does make it hard. And I've always been a fan of Jacoby Brissett. I don't like many quarterbacks, but I've always liked him. I think he's consistent. He's not a superstar. He's not like the golden boy, but he's very consistent. So yeah, so I wanted to, because the first thing my husband said, he's like, it took till overtime to beat the Patriots. I said, no, listen, you need to just slow your roll there for a minute. But there were some really good things in this game. There were some very questionable things. It felt like a team to me, Seattle did, that is still kind of settling in to maybe who they are and who they're going to be, and dealing with injuries on top of that, which still, knock on wood or whatever you got, because compared to some of these other teams, Seattle's looking real good, even with that injury report that came out today. None of us want to be the LA Rams, let's just put it that way. But I did think that there's definitely some things to talk about when it came to this game and this team.
Yeah, it just felt like a growing pains kind of game.
Mm-hmm.
All the things that went right in the preseason and week 1, this time, not everything went perfect. They were up against a good coaching staff that looked at some film and figured out how to attack Seattle offensively and defensively, and made the Seahawks adapt. And they did. They did enough. They adapted enough to get the win, which is what they need to do. And hopefully it'll be just a growing experience as they go through. And but somewhere along the way, they have to figure out how to cover a tight end, because
why is this for 10 years? This has been an issue.
After a decade of that, which was really, it was a flaw of Pete Carroll's scheme, and he didn't really care, because he's like, if they're completing everything underneath, they're not going to score a lot. And he wasn't wrong when the team was really good. But this team is the current coaching staff. That's not the philosophy. And yet Hunter Henry just ate them up in this game. It was, that was a thing, because he
impressive is the word.
Yeah, I mean, he just had a crazy game. I'm going to look at the stats here, because he had 109 receiving yards, and Jacoby Brissett had 149 passing yards. So all of them.
But one would think by halftime would be like, maybe we should pay attention to that dude over there in that corner, right? Yeah, it was a little frustrating to see the same player repeatedly over and over get kind of the best of them. And I really was expecting a bigger halftime adjustment. I was so impressed with last week on the halftime adjustments that they did. Granted, it was against Denver, and we need to keep that in mind. But I expected a bigger adjustment, and I don't think we really saw that in this game, at least to the extent that we did last week.
Yeah, and I think that when I was watching in the first half, it felt like the Seahawks they'd come up to stop the run and they'd hit Hunter Henry right behind the linebackers, and then they'd stay back on the next play to try and stop the pass, and were getting a run right at him. It was like they were always one play off as far as what they were doing, or that New England was just doing a really good job of coming to the line, seeing what Seattle was going to do, and doing the opposite. So one way or the other, it just really kind of felt out of sync and stuff. But then the New England got that running game going, and that felt a little too much like last year.
Fantasy football, Dayna was a little happy about that because I haven't had Vermont students in fantasy football. But it was very frustrating. There was at one point, there was some media professional, I don't know if it was Seahawks media or national media, that said, well, if this doesn't feel like a Pete Carroll game, I don't know what does. And it was very true. It was reminiscent of what we had seen and what we knew. And granted, I think that some of that would have been alleviated with Nwosu being in the lineup, but he wasn't, and Seattle's run problems would have been lessened if Kenneth Walker. So we can play that game just a little bit, but I do think that there were some glaring issues that need to be addressed. I would say before this weekend, though we know Miami is one of those teams that's injury snake bit right now also, but definitely before the line. That Lions team will eat what we've seen from this Seahawks team for dinner.
Yeah, the Lions have looked really good, and which I actually kind of enjoy, because they were the laughing stock of the entire NFL for decades, and for them to actually be good is fun.
Yeah,
I just hope Seattle beats them, but they can win every other game.
Sure, they did.
But just you go through and you look at the stats from this game. Gibson had 96 yards on 11 carries, and Stevenson had 81 yards on 21 carries. They just ran over the Seahawks, and that was not what this was supposed to be. This team was supposed to be a team that could stop the run, and so that was a little scary watching them just get gashed over and over again.
It was, and you tried to find the pattern, and it wasn't always the same player. It's not like Byron Murphy was making all these rookie mistakes or anything in particular. A lot of it just seemed to be miscues and missed tackles, and there were a couple that were just like, okay, I mean, I could not do what they're doing, so I'm not trying to be too judgmental, but at the same time, it's like, okay, the whole focus supposedly of this offseason and the draft was to make that line stronger, to be able to stop the run. Now, granted, it looks like the Patriots are going to rely very heavily on their run for their entire game plan, and good for them, right? And they don't have a superstar quarterback. But at the same time, if you know that going in, should maybe be a little more prepared for it. Like it was really bothersome to me. We did have a couple of really good stats. There's a great video running around of the overtime play where they just stuffed them, and so that they could turn around then and get the ball. Seattle could get the ball. That was a brilliantly executed defensive play, and that was great. So you have these little snippets that you're like, okay, if we can get more of that, if we can see more heavy protection in the front, if we can see less missed tackles, then again, you don't know what a team is till week 4 or 6. So over the next couple of games, that's where I will be focusing to see if there's any improvement.
Yeah. So I was talking with a coworker about all this, and they just kind of painted this whole thing with a wide brush, and they go, well, the middle linebackers are all hurt, so of course they can't stop the run or defend a tight end. And that felt like just giving everybody a pass a little bit too much, because they're 2 of their top 3, linebackers are banged up, but Baker started the game, didn't finish it, and Tyrese Knight came in and played, and he's growing and doing some nice things. But that felt like it was too much of a giving the line a pass, because you see Dre Jones getting pushed out of position, and you see Williams knifing into the backfield like he's going to blow up a play, and then having a run play go right into his gap. And it's like, okay, I love the aggression, I love getting up in there, but sometimes, teams can use that aggression against you. And that was one of the things when I went back and rewatched a little bit, that was a part of New England's game plan, was they were running like old school trap plays where, they would let one of the defensive tackles go unblocked, bring a tight end across to smack him in the side, and then run right into that gap that was created by it. And you're like, wow, that's not supposed to work anymore. That's like 1980s football. And nobody does that anymore. Oh yeah. Well, it worked really, really well in that game because they took advantage of Seattle's aggressiveness. Yeah. I mean, some of it was pretty old school. Like the old guy in me kind of liked this game. There's a lot of defense, a lot of running the ball, and just some really kind of smash mouth stuff that the Patriots were doing, and it was cool. It was like, if Bill was here, Bill would be like ecstatic. That's a Bill football game, right? And he loves the defense, and he loves watching a good running game, and even if it's not Seattle running it. But overall, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. It felt like there was just a lot of little things, and hopefully they can get it corrected, and this will be an aberration and not the norm.
Well, we can hope. It seems to be, though, so far this season, the league is, we've talked about it's a passing game, and it's like, it's all about the quarterback and the receiver. This season, there's a lot of running going on and across the board, and so I think that knowing that, focusing on that has to be a focus for Seattle. We thought it already was, and maybe it will be again. Once again, we know some of these guys are injured. We know it's a second game. I get all that. New head coach, everything. But at the same time, much like you said, we can't just give it a pass. They're showing us week by week who they are going to be. And if a run game is a problem, that echoes too much of the last couple of years for me. So therefore, I want to see the improvement. And I think we will. I really do. Once again, I'm not panicked or too worried because it is week 2 under a new regime. But at the same time, I want to see some progression each week, especially, I mean, they're going to have to run it like crazy in Miami this upcoming week because they have some kid named Skylar as their quarterback, right? So we'll have to see how they do. I don't know. The defense. I loved the second half of the defense in the first game, even understanding the opponent we were dealing with. And we knew going into this that NFL had kind of handed Seattle a really nice schedule on a platter to start. It was a good cushion. It was a good place to start. These couple of teams that were supposedly growing, and the Patriots aren't quite the team that we thought they're better than we thought they were going to be. But at the same time, the defense made me a little nervous, and so I'm really hoping that we see a good improvement this next week going into the third game. So the offense, on the other hand, was a little better. Well except
are you concerned of the fact that Charbonnet only had 38 yards in the entire game? Because in the first game, everything worked once the running game started.
Yeah,
and then in this game, it just fell apart as far as the running game went.
I know so many people are piling on Zach, and I don't believe he deserves all that he is getting. I think that line was the most unhelpful it could have been to that poor kid in the run game. And kudos to the Patriots defense. They were very good, right? Like, so that is too, but yeah, his carries were like, what was it, like 2 yards a carry or something? He just wasn't getting there, right?
7.
Yeah. And so it was just not, it wasn't what they wanted it to be. But I think they recognized that very quickly. They're like, okay, this is not working for us. So Gino, go. And Gino looked great. He had great stats. He's ranked one of the highest. He looked fabulous. You have 2 over 100-yard receivers. So they made that adjustment. And I liked that. They're like, this is not working. Do I think Kenneth Walker would have done better? Yes. How much, though? I don't know, because it was it seemed to be kind of one thing after another. I think he's got a little better ability to kind of see where the gaps are and stuff than maybe Charbonnet does. But at the same time, we don't know, right? But I think that the adjustment then made by the coaching staff, once they realized how poorly that was going, they deserve credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, they did make that adjustment, and I love the fact that they went to JSN early, and he was moving the chains for him, and he, the big play was to Metcalf in the first half for that big touchdown, but all of the little plays seemed to all go to JSN. So the Patriots adapted, and they switched up some coverages, and they rolled the safety down onto JSN. And what happened? Metcalf went off in the second half. And that's how you end up with 200-yard receivers is the Seahawks are just, if they can give Geno a little bit of time, there's just too many weapons. He's gonna, you can't shut everything down. The problem is when they can't give Geno the time.
Right.
Because the line's so bad. So
what are they going to do about that? I think about this line quite a bit, and it's like, yeah, Abe Lucas, from everything we're hearing, I mean, he still is not practicing with other people yet, but he's running and he's cutting and he's doing all the stuff he needs to do. So maybe that comes up. How big of an impact does Abe Lucas make? That's gonna be a question mark. And how long will it take him to get back into it a little bit? I always say, you got to get your cleats on the ground first and kind of feel how that's going to be again. I think Fant coming back, and hopefully that will be this week, would make a huge difference also. But at the same time, I don't know for the run game if it's going to make that big. Hopefully it will. Hopefully we'll be just shocked and in awe of how good all of a sudden the line gets. I'm not holding my breath. I'm just saying I'm not holding my breath, but I think honestly, that, we'll see.
The most discouraging thing about the offensive line has been Tomlinson through these two games at left guard. He just he keeps getting beat across his face, and just so many of the big plays where the opposing team has someone in the backfield instantly are coming right over the top of him.
Right.
And he was supposed to be, that veteran, the guy they signed to come in and be steady and just really anchor that line. And he's kind of been the weak link.
Yeah. I don't think I was that excited by him coming, to be quite honest with you.
I wasn't excited at all because if you look, he hasn't been good for a couple of years. But that's what he was supposed to be, right? They had this competition of these young guys that hopefully one of them will step up at right guard. But left guard's fine. We're okay for a year. At this point, get Christian Haynes in there. Let's he needs to be playing so he can get through some of this rookie stuff and whatever, because he can't be worse than what we're seeing from Tomlinson. And that's upsetting because that was supposed to be one of the positions that was maybe not good, but not terrible. And it was
supposed to be settled a little bit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that would be smart too. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if they give, him one more game, maybe two. I always think 4 is kind of the benchmark. And then just let Haynes go. Okay, if this is the kid of the future, we drafted him, just put him in there and see what the hell happens, especially once you get some of those other pieces back, once Fant's back, once you get some of those other pieces, maybe. I don't know. It's, it is the bane of a Seahawks fan's existence, right? Is the offensive line and stopping the run game. And that is something that we were never worried about the secondary. We were never worried about the wide receivers or the running backs, offense that way. It was those two things. And those are the things that all of us talked about all off season, from the minute they got rid of Pete Carroll up until camp. I don't know within 2 games that we've seen a big enough improvement that I'm excited about anyway. But at the same time, 2 games. I just have to, it's my little mantra. It's 2 games. It's 2 games. It's 2 games. And, at least they've still managed to win them. You got to stack those wins with the harder games that were coming. So you should at least win the games you're supposed to. And these 2 games they were supposed to win. And they did. It was a struggle, especially that second one, but they managed. So that's saying something, I guess. So
they're 2-0. And this next week was supposed to be one of the tougher weeks. You got a team that's look like a playoff team. They've got a couple of the best most dynamic weapons in the entire league at wide receiver. Look going to be really tough. and then their star quarterback goes on injured reserve. And what are you expecting from Miami this weekend? Or do we have any idea what to expect from Miami this weekend?
So, you know me, Keith, you know, I have a tendency to give nicknames to coaches and players and certain things. And we call Mike McDaniel hipster homebrewer. That's just what I think he looks like, is a hipster homebrewer. And apparently he's heard about it and thought it was funny. So that's a good thing. But the thing of it is that I don't put much past him. I think he's a fantastic coach, and he understands the strengths of his teams and what he can get out of them. Them losing Tua is a gut punch, right? And you could see it when Tua walked off the field. I mean, that picture of him kissing him on the forehead just broke my heart, because he knew it. It broke my heart for Tua. It broke my heart for the team. At the same time, we can't discount. I mean, they have a lot of injuries. It's not just their quarterback. They have a lot of injuries stacking up. So this game doesn't bother me as much. If it was in Miami, I'd still be nervous. You know, I still would, even with this, you know, what is that quarterback's name? Skylar something. I keep forgetting whatever it's going to be, but I would be a little more nervous about it. But I'm not predicting the blowout. I don't know if you've seen, there's been a lot of predictions that have come out just today from national media member. Everyone's like, oh, it's like Seahawks 24, you know, Dolphins 6. And I'm like, I don't know that that's true. I don't know.
The Seahawks are 4.5 point favorites as of right now. So
right. I don't think it's going to be
by 18 seems
a bit muchy, Adam Rank. I'm just saying, you know what I mean? But the thing of it is that the problem of it is for Seattle is we don't know how they're going to adjust. We don't know what they're going to do, other than we can assume they're going to run the ball a lot more. Awesome. What are we not so good at? Right. And so that makes me a little bit nervous. I don't think that we can just write this game off. Before the injury to Tua happened, I had this team going, being 2-2 after week 4. I had them winning the first 2, losing the next 2. Now I expect, and it could still very well happen, but I expect them now, maybe, especially since they're at home, to win this football game. I don't think it'll be nearly by the margin that others do, but at the same time, you don't know, because we don't know what's going to get thrown at us with all these injuries.
Yeah, it is like the Seahawks had 18 players on their injury report
today. Did you see that? It gave me so much stress. Well, and then I was like, it's Wednesday. Calm down.
I know, and that's, I was telling myself that, but you look at the names on here. You've got, you know, Kenneth Walker, Jerome Baker, Uchenna Nwasu, Boye Mafe, Kayvon Wallace, Leonard Williams, DK Metcalf. I mean, those are stars, right? Those are big time names that this team needs to come in and perform, that did not practice. They did not participate in this. And that's enough to, you know, make my stress level go up a little bit.
Make sure feel a little tight. No, I get it. Yeah. At the same time, I think we need to look at some of those things. I think that the majority of those games will be just fine to play. I don't think that I mean, you know, DK's playing, you know, Tyler's playing. You have all these things. It was nice, though, to see Farrell Brown in limited instead of, you know, did not practice. So that's encouragement. I don't know how big of an impact he'll make, but it's one more body, right? Let's do it. Why not?
Fant.
Yeah.
Both Fants, Noah Fant and George Fant were both limited participants. But typically, if you're limited on Wednesday, unless you go down and do not participate on Thursday, you almost always play.
Right.
And so that's good to see.
Fingers crossed, right? Like, we can hope. So yeah, I think that the more concerning, obviously, it looks like we would be surprised if Kenneth Walker would play. And so we'll have to, you know, work on that. And maybe another week with the ones will help Charbonnet. Why are we not seeing the other running backs? You know, so maybe they'll start switching that up a little bit and see what's going on there.
Yeah, I'd like to see McIntosh get a few carries and just see.
Ooh, I almost because there were
McIntosh. Because he looked there were points in the preseason where he looked explosive. He looked like the guy, you know, from Georgia. I get he was a 7th round draft pick, so everybody passed on him, but he put up some major stats, especially his junior year, and then, you know, he came back for his senior year and it wasn't as good, and he fell, but he looked explosive, and I don't want to see him, you know, see if he can bust a couple plays out there. and see what he can do, especially if Charbonnet is getting bottled up, because Charbonnet is not the fastest guy. He's
a power runner.
He's a between the tackles power runner. And maybe, I mean, that's not who Kenneth Walker is. He's very explosive, very high end speed, but also great acceleration, lateral agility, those kind of things. And that seems to work behind this offensive line. And I don't blame Charbonnet for that. That's who he is. And it's just a matter of, it's go with what works. And if McIntosh gives him a better chance to, get some of those runs and have him turn positive, get him out there and run him.
He can't do worse than 2.7. Right. Or maybe he can. Well, I don't know, but
he can in that he could turn the ball over. Fair. One thing about Charbonnet does not turn the ball over. And that wins him a lot of points in my book, because I freaking hate turnovers. So
I know, I do too. So I wonder though, against this Miami team, I think it's going to be really interesting. The offense, we've now seen a crazy run game in the first game. Now we've seen this fantastic, passing, game that we had run. And so you get to Miami, it's like, which one are we going to get? It'll be kind of interesting. And how prepared will Miami be for that? I think DK will just keep getting double. That dude, he's just a target for these guys, right? And so the fact that he got 100 yards, I was so excited, because I've seen game after game after game, year after year after year, where they just absolutely suffocate that guy. So it was nice to see him get going. And the different uses of JSN is very good too. And I like the way that they're using Tyler. Tyler's very situational, and I think that that's good because he's so reliable, right? And so you have that in him too. So I don't know. It's the Mike Mack duel, and so we'll have to see how these guys do, because they're both young, very smart. An offensive-minded coach versus a defensive-minded coach. It could be really fun.
Yeah, I think this game is going to be fun. I was actually kind of looking forward to this game, when the schedule came out, because I'm like, it's going to be fun. You've got McDonald and his defense, where he moves everyone around, and he's, everything's disguised and whatever, and they're going to throw, Tua at him with all those weapons they've got down there. It's just going to be a fun, strength on strength kind of thing. It's not really that. It is not shaping up to be. The defense after this last game, I'm not quite as sold on as being dominant. And honestly, I'm still trying to figure out who Miami's quarterback is going to be, because
Skylar something, I swear.
Yeah, it's someone who Skylar Thompson. That's what it is.
Thompson, thank you. Okay, had gone from my brain.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a it's not a name that's not a name that you're going to remember, because it's not been memorable at any point in his career. So they did add Hundley off Baltimore's practice squad, which is a guy that I was wondering if this, the Seahawks might have interest to put on their practice squad, when he got cut. They didn't, apparently, but yeah, so he's now the backup quarterback in Miami, and he's been there for a week.
A whole week. So I have a question for you, Keith. So the person obviously that has to be dealt with is Tyreek Hill, right? You have to keep an eye on him. Insanely fast. Would you have one of the cornerbacks shadow him, or would you just let Julian Love play cleanup if need be? How do you want Seattle to play Tyreek Hill? Because he fascinates me.
He should fascinate everybody. I mean, he got that kind of, it's more than just the speed.
Oh, he's so
his
elusive.
Ability to change directions at full speed, and his ability to get from standing to full speed in 2 steps. He is so explosive. Honestly, I kind of think that, part of me is just put Tariq Woolen on him. He's one of the fastest cornerbacks in the entire league. He's probably one of the few that Tyreek Hill can't run away from. But he's also 6'2" and
doesn't change direction quickly.
He's a straight line runner with a ton of makeup speed. So then part of me is like, well, put Witherspoon on him. But then you're taking one of your best weapons that you can move all over the field and do a lot of cool things with, and you're tying him up on a particular role the entire game and not letting him be dynamic.
Exactly.
And that's the reason why Miami gave up so much to get him. When they traded for him, because he is a guy that is going to give defensive coordinators like headaches and migraines, and he's a lot of problems. I think you keep Julian Love back.
Yep.
And you let him play cleanup, and you either try and run some sort of zone so that way he can't beat you underneath and everything, and you just try and keep a safety behind him, or you let Devin Witherspoon match him up, because he's one of the few guys that I would trust. One of the few guys in the league I would trust to at least be able to try and stay with him in man coverage, because
the interesting thing for this, he's so good. And the interesting thing with me is that's why I'm not writing this game off. It's like, it's only going to take one or two well-placed footballs from Mr. Skylar Thompson to make this a tight game. Right. And we know that. And it's not just him. I don't think Waddle is injured. I can't remember, but there's multiple players on that team. Right. And so I think that our secondary, I have full faith in, and yet I just know how much better Tyreek Hill is than the average wide receiver. Right. And so making sure that line puts that constant pressure on the backup quarterback so that he doesn't, but just knowing that sometimes that's going to get through. And then what is your game plan for that? That's what I'm going to watch. And I think that that'll be really interesting. And then to see how the line handles the run game, which I'm sure will be pretty prominent in this game. So that's what I'm going to be keeping my eye on Sunday. So
the whole thing with Tyreek Hill, and I know this is a thing for every team that Miami plays against, right?
For sure.
He is that super unique like matchup. And every team's got to figure out, what are we going to do with this guy, because he can beat us. It reminds me of Steve Smith Jr. or Steve Smith Sr. Back in the mid 2000s.
Okay.
Right? So if you've got, he was with Carolina, and against the Seahawks in the NFC title game, or was it the AFC title game? No, it was the NFC title game. They had moved over by then.
2008.
And yeah, so that was the Holmgren Super Bowl loss and that, but he was dominant in every single game that year, and teams could not cover him. They tried all sorts of things. So what did Holmgren do? He put a freaking linebacker out there, and you're like, what the hell is he doing? And they just asked Hill to come up and smack him on every play and then go play linebacker. And somehow it worked. And you're
disrupt him, yeah.
Yeah, it's like they put a linebacker out there, Leroy Hill, to come up and just literally just hit him on every single play, and then go over and set the edge against the run.
Well, with the way our linebacker core looks right now, I don't know that they can do that.
No, they can't do that.
Right, exactly, yeah.
But it's just one of those things where you're like, what do you do? I mean, especially if you were a team like the Seahawks were a couple years ago, before the Woolen and Witherspoon draft picks, what do you do against a guy like that?
You just let him run.
Cry and
just hope that you can get enough pressure on that quarterback to screw up the throw. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm excited for this game because I think it'll tell us a lot about this team, right? This is I say it's our first real challenge, Seattle's first real challenge. And yet again, I just keep reiterating how impressed I was with the Patriots and how well they put that game together. So I don't want to discount. I don't want people to think I'm discounting that, because I was very impressed. And the 2 games in a row for them was great. But I think this is our first real talent heavy team. And granted, some of their talent is gone right now. But at the same time, I'm excited to see the chess match that will come out between the Mike Mack duel, which is what I keep calling this game.
So the one thing, if Miami has a weakness, which they do, besides Skylar Thompson, it's they'll give up a lot of yards on defense. That's not a great defensive team.
Right.
So you look at the stats and you look at kind of, the ratings and all of that. Geno should feast in this game, right? Like he should be able to put up enough points that Skylar Thompson is not going to be able to keep up, even with Tyreek Hill. I mean, that's you look at on paper, and that's what seems to jump off, the page as far as all of that. Why am I not comfortable with that? Like I look at that and it's like that's what it is. And that's probably what the teams are the national guys are looking at when they're predicting a Seahawk blowout. It's like a guy like Skylar Thompson can't keep up. Their defense isn't good enough, so they're going to give up a lot of points. And you have to, win that horse race, and they're not going to be able to. He's going to throw a pick or something, and it's going to make it easy for Seattle. I just don't feel comfortable with that analysis. And maybe it's just I'm just cynical, and I've been a Seahawks fan and a Mariners fan for way too long, and I'm used to being, surprised in negative ways, but
it's called Seahawks PTSD. Is what that's called. It was so funny. I was talking with some friends. I was in Seattle this last weekend, and I was talking with some friends, and I'm like, it used to be there for a good chunk of time. Even if Seattle got behind, I wasn't worried because I just had full faith in this team that they could pull it out. Did they always? No, but I knew that they could. And so there was that comfort level. That has been gone for a long time now. And I think that we still have, or they'll get up and then to have a disastrous third quarter. Good Lord, the dreaded third quarter. And so it's like, I think that's we still don't know enough on film about this new coaching regime. And I mean, I know everyone's obsessed with him, and I'm not saying I don't like him. He's just new. And so we need to see kind of what he's going to put out there. And so I think that that's really interesting. Plus, every week he's got these new schemes, and Witherspoon says, oh, this is the tip of the iceberg for the defense. Awesome. What else you got for us? Is it going to work? Because this week didn't work, and that sort of thing. So I think that there's just a lot of variables. And so it's understandable that we're all a little nervous about this. I do think this is it's going to be a much nicer game for Seahawks fans than it would have been previously, if Tua had still played. But at the same time, there is that unknown. How are they going to adjust from what we saw? From week 1, they made great halftime adjustments. Week 2, we didn't see that. And there were some definite problems. So what do we get in week 3? This whole season might be like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's not just a new coach. He's a first-time head coach.
I know.
And we have a first-time coordinator. He was been a coordinator in college, but not in the pros. I was thinking on the offensive side. So, we've got the NFL is very different than college. And so just because they've been successful at the college level doesn't mean it's going to translate. We've seen,
although I've liked what I've seen so far. I mean, I really have, because you guys know I'm not. I mean, most of the people who follow me know that I'm not a huge college football person. I do watch some, especially getting toward the end of the season. I'm trying to figure out who's going to be in the draft and all that stuff. But the super tiny details. There's just too many teams for me. I just can't do it. Give me a bad time about it if you want to. I just can't do it. But the interesting thing is that what we've seen from him so far, it has translated well. Whatever he's doing has translated very well to the NFL for Ryan Grubb. And so my assumption is that's just going to continue as he gets further into the season. And I know that everyone gives, I think I said this last week, everyone gives Mike McDonald all the credit for the defense, but Aiden Dirty is a fantastic coordinator, and implementing those things is his job. And I think that they've done a really good job. So I liking what I'm seeing. I just need to see it consistently. And by week 2, it hasn't always been consistent. So that's what we need.
We just don't know yet.
Yeah,
we don't.
Exactly.
Seahawk PTSD. That was the thing. Pete Carroll seemed to have a way of making the easiest game really hard. And I think at some point it just became it's just part of our soul. We just don't know.
You're not wrong.
We just don't want to trust anything.
Right. Because we don't want to get hurt. Yeah, for sure. Sure.
So do you have a prediction for this week?
I think Seattle will win. I think it'll be closer than people think. I think the first quarter is going to tell us a lot about what Miami is bringing to the table. But if I had to give a score prediction, based on the offense that we saw last week, I think that Seattle will score at least 23 points, probably close, maybe even 27. And then I bet Miami gets, I always say minimums. They're going to get a minimum. Tyreek Hill's going to get a touchdown. So I think that we're going to get at least probably 13, maybe 14 points out of. So I still think it'll be a pretty decent spread, but I don't think it's going to be some crazy blowout.
Yeah, I was looking at, I think that they're going to be able, I mean, you've got Tyreek Hill and Waddle, and those guys are going to get some yards and they're going to move, but can they get into the end zone? They'll get one.
I think, for sure. Yeah.
But will they get 2? Will they get to 14? I don't know. I think I'm more comfortable with them getting to 16.
Yeah.
And having 3 field goals, rather than a second touchdown. And so, I was thinking like 24-16 or 23-16. It's going to be tighter than a lot of people think. I just think it's going to be lower scoring. It's a defensive game. I mean, it's not going to be an offensive game when you've got Skylar Thompson as quarterback for one of the teams. And
we're not looking at 2 30-pointers here. No, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, so when I'm recording with Bill this next week, and it's gonna be so the Seahawks won 43-41.
Yeah, and I'll come back on and be like, Dayna has no idea what she's talking about. So sorry.
You know as much of what you're talking about as I do. So so there's that.
Yeah.
Cool. So thanks again for coming back on. I really appreciate it. I know that, sometimes short notice and all of that, and you're just jumping in and helping me out while Bill is, gallivanting around Italy.
Bill's allowed a vacation. You guys are both allowed a vacation. So yes, I'm happy to step in, and I appreciate you all, asking, and I enjoy doing this show. It's very different than the other 2 shows that I do. So I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, see, Bill is allowed a vacation, but did he have to do it during the season? Couldn't he have done it in June when there's nothing to talk about?
Right.
No, again, thank you very, very much for coming on. It's been great to have you here, and been great for an opportunity to catch up a little bit. So, so you guys can find the show. We're everywhere. That podcasts were found. You can also find us on YouTube at Seahawks Playbook. You can find Dayna on Twitter at Dayna OG. And with Our Turf Football, it's one of the best out there. So thank you very much for having us. And so everyone, until next time, go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.